Now this is the ute we've all been waiting for, a proper performance off-road vehicle that doesn't have a lame diesel motor. Now don't get me wrong, diesel engines have their place in the ute market, but this is what we've all been waiting for when you put the name Raptor on a Ford Ranger. Now we've seen the likes of the Ford F-150 Raptor, the Bronco Raptor, and now we have this, which has a brand new 3-liter V6 petrol twin-turbo motor, which makes this thing super exciting. There's a bunch of new features on this thing, so I want to walk you around the exterior features, the interior features, and take it for a drive to let you know if it's worth buying one of these. My name's Cameron. This is Product Review Cars. Let's get into it. Let's talk pricing. Now you're looking at just over $80,000 before on-road costs, which means you're looking at over $90,000 drive away. That's a lot of cash for a ute like this, but this is also a lot of ute. Now let's talk the exterior features. Obviously the new redesign. This thing's so blocky. It looks a lot more aggressive than the previous generation, and I'm a massive fan of this. And it means you can get that F-150 look without having to import and drive around a giant American truck. And I love the look that this car has, and especially this grey paint, although I would have gone for Code Orange, which is a bit more true to the Raptor name, but nonetheless this is a bit more understated and looks quite nice. Now I'm loving the new headlight design with LED daytime running lights and LED headlamps, and these also corner when you're steering, which I really quite like, and they look very much in line with what Ford's doing with their lineup over in the US market with something like the Maverick and the F-150, which looks quite good. We have these giant Ford block letters along the front. Looks very much like the previous generation, but it's far more aggressive here, and I think it looks very suited for this car. Now down below we have some silver accenting, but we also have some giant tow hooks here, just in case you need to get brought out of any sort of sticky situations. You have 2 of them on the front, which is very good. And you also have an over 2mm thick bash plate down below, because when you're going on your Baja mode and you're going through all these moguls and any sort of rocks in the way, at least you have some protection from the factory underneath the front there. Now there's actually a lot going on here on the side. Let's start with the 33-inch tires. We have some small alloys in here. I love the design of the new alloys. They look quite cool, and I also do like this little Ford badge which you can spin around into the middle there, so you can make sure that all your Ford badges are lined up when you park. But also we have some BF Goodrich tires, and they are Baja Champion certified, so those are very cool to have from factory, and they also look great, but we'll see how they drive in just a second. Now you can see these giant fenders that we have here. They look quite aggressive, and they do feel quite nice as well. They're not cheap plastic, so that feels great to sort of touch and feel and look at as well, and they don't have any ugly rivets, so that gives me 2 thumbs up there because I think that looks quite good. These side steps here, nice and really quite solid. They're Raptor branded, and I really like how they look. They're good sliders as well, so that should protect your bodywork if you start to go a bit more aggressive in your off-roading endeavors. We have keyless entry and exit without a button, which I like, feels a bit more upmarket, and obviously this thing's quite tall. It's lifted, it has box suspension, and these things adjust at over 500 times a second, so that's a major part of why you buy one of these, because you're in these cool box shocks, and we'll see how they go when we're out on our trail. Now additionally, this has an 850mm weighting depth, and it also has a reinforced chassis and reinforced struts as well around your shock towers. Now the back of the Ranger Raptor is still very special, and this whole exterior is really delivering a sense of occasion, and especially thanks to these giant exhaust tips on both sides. You can hear them rumbling away, and they sound spectacular, so take a listen. Now what's good is that they're valved, so they don't have to sound super loud all the time. There is a quiet mode as well. Now I really like these rear tail lights as well. The design's quite nice. They have blind spot radars put into them as well. More notably, this dark Ford badge at the back looks so good. So much better than the blue Ford badge. And then below here, we have another full-size spare tire, which is just all very useful. Now, because this thing's running Fox shocks all around, and it was worth noting as well, this has disc brakes all around rather than drums at the rear. This does tow a little less, so it's looking at around 2.5 tons in terms of its towing capacity. Now I think Ford does one of the best rear trays in the industry. First of all, let's talk about how this thing locks. It locks with your key and central locking. I don't know why it's so hard for other ute manufacturers to do the same thing. And then secondly, it's so easy to open, a child could open this. And so it's not as heavy to close or open as other ute rear trays. So that's quite useful. And also when you drop it, it's not going to make a loud bang or anything like that, so it's pretty light. Also, we do have a little tape measure that runs along the back here and some areas to put some clamps in, so you can use this to saw and measure any bits and pieces, which is very useful, especially when you're on the fly. And in the back as well, you have 180 watts of power through a 12-volt socket here in the rear. And then jumping into the back is actually quite easy, so you can sort of climb along the side here. We have some nice floodlights in the back as well, plenty of tie-down areas, and also do like the bed liner material, feels quite solid, doesn't move around. And also there's plenty of accessories you can put on the back here to add a canopy, and you can even have a power rolling top that goes in the back from Ford, and you can use the key fob to open and close that, which I think is quite useful as well. And then Ford's also redesigned this area to make it more practical and wider and easier and more flat than the previous generation Ranger. Now it's also worth noting that Ford reduced the payload capacity in the rear because we have the box shocks attached to this thing, so it's going to carry less than a ton here as a payload in the back. Now jumping in, this car doesn't come standard with any carpets, or at least our press car didn't, so I think it's a bit surprising for the price that's being commanded back here. Now in the rear, it's actually very comfortable. The spongy sports seats are very good, and because Ford have made a conscious effort to make sure that the front seats and the rear seats are extra padded for more aggressive off-roading, which is quite nice. They have a bit more lateral support, even though in the back it isn't really that noticeable, but it looks like they've made an attempt. And I also do like the code orange accents back here. That's like the OG Raptor color, and you can see it all through the stitching and little highlights here. Now this rear armrest I found to be quite annoying to operate because it sort of requires a bit of force, and then I found it to be a bit hard to sort of pull out of this area. Now I do like the sculpting out of the front bucket seats as well, because look, this is sitting behind my driving position and I have a bit of limited knee room, but at least I have some sculpting in the rear seat to make sure that, you know, I can feel quite comfortable. I've also got a nice map pocket here as well. We have some air vents here and 2 USB ports, one USB-C and one USB type A. Some more additional pockets here as well, which is all very useful. And yeah, the middle seat is relatively comfortable and nice and spongy compared to other middle seats I've sat in, so that's quite good. And everyone has a decent amount of headroom. I'm 5'11". I feel like I've got an okay amount of headroom in the rear, especially if we're going to be bouncing over some undulating terrain. And then if we look at the actual window, it goes down all the way. Now jumping out, you can actually open this bottom area up like that to reveal some storage areas. And I also like how Ford's trimmed but one of them and the other one doesn't really require it. So you have plenty of areas to store any sort of valuables underneath the seat, and it does lock down, so that's quite nice. And then in addition, this whole seat area can fold down flat like this, so if you prefer to have your seats folded down, you can easily do that. Ford knows how to make a sense of occasion with their cabin design here, and you get pretty much every feature here in the Ford Ranger Raptor. I have a 12-inch driver's display in front of me, and then I have another 12-inch display here as well as a vertical screen. This feels like the most advanced ute interior I've ever experienced, and it really feels leagues above what else others are doing in the industry. And you can sort of see why Ford's justifying the price, because there's no real direct competitors that are undercutting this in terms of technology. This is just next level. Now there's no heads-up display up top here on the dash. We do have some harsh materials, but at least we have this cool spongy looking material around the top, which makes it feel a bit more premium, a bit more off-road focus. And there's heaps of code orange accents, especially this 12 o'clock indicator here on the steering wheel. There's a sports Raptor specific steering wheel as well. We have orange accents around the actual trim of these air vents, and then down the seat on the shifter, and just pretty much everywhere. It's really quite cool, and that's why I think I'd go for the code orange exterior, because I think it'd complement the interior quite nicely. Now talking about storage, we have a little sort of area up top above the glove box, which is locked, but it is just a little bit finicky to get open on occasion, but you can close and secure any items there. There's a little shelf below that with some rubberized material, and we also have a normal size glove box. Now the door bins are a little bit thin, but at least the little cup holders here in the middle do fit regular size water bottles, which is quite good. We do have a wireless phone charger beneath this giant screen, and a little area to charge your items with a USB type C and type A port there. And I do like the shifter design. It feels quite nice to use, but I did find it a little bit hard to knock into reverse naturally, because sometimes I found myself knocking into park by accident. Now we have our drive modes here, so you can access all your 4 drive controls, or you can let the computer do it for you by going through all the different drive modes Ford has to offer. And I do also like how we have a quick access to our sort of off-road menus through a button here, and it jumps up here on the screen. And this car does have an electronic handbrake as well. Now let's talk about this screen here. This is using Ford's latest tech, and it looks fantastic. It's all connected as well, and it's sort of intuitive to use. I do like the vertical integration. I like how it's not stuck up on the dash as well. Feels very, very futuristic, even for just a car made in 2022. Haven't really seen anything like this. As you know, even Tesla does horizontal screens, so a giant vertical screen is quite cool. Now there's little 3 buttons up the top that has sort of quick menus to sort of radio, phone, navigation, media, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Now the screen in front of me is also very complicated. There's a lot going on, and it means that you can customize this. So you can customize what's going on in the dials. You can even have a quiet mode, so it's quite good for long road trips, which will just show you your speed and other vital information. You have some cool controls running across the top, like a turbo boost gauge and sort of your oil temps and all that sort of stuff, and also obviously your fuel gauge as well. Giant metal paddles, feel that. They feel great, but I did find the engagement just a bit plasticky. I was like, oh cool, nice metal paddles, but the engagement point doesn't feel super crisp, but nonetheless, they're still quite fun to use. Here we have some buttons, and normally I wouldn't talk about the buttons on the steering wheel, but these are quite important. On the left, we have our driving controls and volume. They're not so, different from other cars, but on the right, we have an R badge, which is like the Raptor R, and that's basically a customizable mode, which means you can jump to that and you can customize the steering, suspension, and the exhaust into like your own setting, which is really quite cool. Now, also it's worth noting you do have heaps of auxiliary tabs up here which you can flick through, 6 of them. So it means that you can sort of customize your car to add extra lights, anything like that, and then hook them up to your car and have pre-made buttons here to access them, which are quite nice. They're backlit, so it just feels like you don't have to ruin your interior by adding a custom button, which I think is very nice. And also this car does have Bang & Olufsen speakers, which sound pretty good, but I wouldn't say they sound like anything like a proper Bang & Olufsen sound system that you hear in the showrooms, but it is still a nice audio upgrade. And it's also worth noting you do have your trailer controls nicely integrated here, far better than I've seen in other utes. Okay, so the party piece of this car is that 3-liter petrol V6 twin turbocharged motor. It's got a hell of a lot of power, so pretty much it has close to 400 horsepower, which is a lot of torque as well. So yeah, sure, some diesel V6s do make similar amount of torque, but this power is just unrivaled. Now, as we're going along, I'm in normal mode, and this thing has a interesting four-wheel drive setup. So instead of having your normal dials and stuff like that, instead you have an automatic mode, and it's tied to the drive mode. So as we're crawling along this little section here, I'll go ahead and just chuck it into a sand mode, because that's pretty much the terrain we're on. And like I said, I've gone through all the different modes, and we have pretty much, how many are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modes. And then they all automatically adjust the suspension, the exhaust, the steering feel, and also what sort of drivetrain we're working with. So right now we're in 4 high, and we're working through a bit of a trail through here. And I just want to see what the composure's like. These Fox shocks are pretty unique as well. And the thing with this car is that it's meant to be a car that you can go anywhere off-road. So you can do the slow stuff and you can do the real fast, undulating Baja terrain. Now those BF Goodrich tires provide so much grip, both on and off-road. And so they're not slipping or anything like that, like I've experienced in other sort of off-road focused utes like the Nissan Navara Warrior. I felt that sort of slipped a little bit in some on-road sort of driving, but here, these tires do such an amazing job. Now the ride is so composed for a ute in this segment. It's just so nice to drive around. There's no sort of rear wobble happening with the tray. This car, yes, is heavy. It's over 2 ton, so it's a big car, which means out on the road, you do feel it through corners. So despite this sort of feeling a little bit more sporty, yeah, unfortunately, it's not super tight in the corners, because you do combat that weight and sort of high center of gravity. But as we can sort of feel here, this undulating terrain is not a problem at all for this ute. It's just so composed. And yes, like I mentioned, the pinnacle off-road driving would be that Land Rover Defender. This thing comes so close to that, it's ridiculous. Like, if you were to drive them back to back, sure, you might feel a little bit more composed in the Defender, but this thing is just so refined. Now, as we sort of move a bit faster through here, the Fox shocks, which adjust at 500 times a second, are just incredible. They do such a good job of being able to sort of respond to what's happening underneath me. And look, even driving through this terrain, unbelievable. Moving through this rate on this sort of road is just really quite impressive. So I'm just sort of blown away by the driving experience the Ford Ranger Raptor is offering. Now, in terms of sort of the off-road controls that we have, we can put like a trail cruise control on. I've obviously got my cameras set up as well, and if I use my washers, I can wash all my cameras as well because I've all got little independent washers, which is very useful. And yeah, this car is just a bona fide off-road vehicle. Throw in the drivetrain as well. I was thinking to myself, maybe a diesel's better for like slow off-road stuff thanks to that low down torque, but the amount of torque the thing has really doesn't make me want to go ahead and buy a diesel over this anyway. Now the brakes I did find a little lacking on the road. You sort of have to get used to them because it does feel like it's pulling up over 2 ton worth of truck. So they're not like oversized brakes, and you can only fit so big brakes in a smaller alloy wheel when you're compensating with large 33-inch tires. Now what I especially like as well is because of its smaller size, it's going to be a little bit easier to navigate off-road as well as on-road compared to something like the incoming Ford F-150 and the Dodge Ram lineup. And then the other thing is worth noting here is that this engine is quite thirsty. Even after doing lots of hours of highway driving, I was averaging around 15 liters per 100 Ks combined with city driving. So that's quite a lot of fuel use, and it's not too cheap to fill this thing up either. You can fill up with 91, but you do get reduced horsepower outputs, so that's something worth noting. So in a normal dual cab ute, I'd probably travel a bit slower along this track, but in the Ford Ranger Raptor, let's see how it goes. Now it's holding gears a bit longer, and as we come to a big dip here, yeah, we can sort of come out of that quick. And away we go. And then down this big circuit here, I'm still very careful about these sort of undulating terrains, but I've never had more fun in an off-road vehicle outside of the Ford Ranger Raptor. And then let's talk grip. So off from a standstill like this on some dirt, I'm just going to plant it to see how this car manages its horsepower. So in 3, 2, 1, we're planting it. Wow. Now that puts down the traction really quite well. And then, the top end's sort of letting the wheels do their thing, but I'm really impressed. Now, if you're looking for a reason not to buy one of these, well, you're talking to the wrong person. This is personally a dream car of mine. I really enjoyed driving this because we can't get those old school F-150 SVT Raptors that launched the Raptor name here in Australia. You can import them, but it's not really the same. But those have been my favorite cars for the longest period of time. And also all the new Raptor products Ford is bringing out, it's all quite exciting, especially the new Raptor R, the Bronco Raptor, and now we have this, the Ranger Raptor. The first generation Ranger Raptor was a good proof of concept, but the second generation has nailed the formula. But if those reasons don't affect you, then you're looking at one of the most brilliant utes you can buy, full stop.